A real estate tycoon picks up the phone in his office on the 34th floor with one unyielding intention: to dismantle the life of the maid caught on camera near his estate's safe room, where valuables have gone missing. In his empire, betrayal is a liability that demands swift elimination, no matter if it's a business rival or the quiet woman who dusts his halls. He dials her number, his tone already forged in granite, prepared to strip her job, her reputation, and whatever future she has left. But instead of the maid's voice on the line, a small, tear-choked voice answers from the other end, his own 9-year-old daughter, sharp and unbluffable, pleading in raw urgency. "Daddy, she didn't steal anything. I know what was in that safe room. I was there, and I can prove it." When he presses for details, stunned, the child's revelations unravel his ironclad assumptions, exposing a web of deception that shakes the foundations of his household and forces him to confront the fragility beneath his power. A man who rules a city from above discovers for the first time the cost of being wrong and the quiet bravery it takes to listen. If this story resonates with you, tapping into the power of truth over assumption or the courage of the overlooked, give it a like to spread the word. Share it with someone grappling with their own blind spots. And subscribe for more tales that remind us redemption starts with pausing to hear the unexpected. Rafael Moreno adjusted the sleeve of his tailored suit as he surveyed the Houston skyline from the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 34th floor penthouse office. Now the aroma of fresh espresso from his imported machine blended with the subtle polish of leather-bound ledgers on the shelves, reinforcing the unyielding order he demanded in every corner of his world. At 38, he'd forged his real estate dominion on a single unbreakable tenet: weakness invites ruin, and ruin must be excised without remorse. His fingers drummed a deliberate cadence on the polished mahogany desk as the alert from his household manager lay open before him, one name flagged in stark red that grated against his sense of control. Lena Vasquez, estate maid, implicated by security footage near the second-floor safe room amid missing items. He dimly recalled the soft-spoken woman, always averting her gaze as she tidied the corridors of his private mansion, efficient and unobtrusive. Until now, when her apparent theft challenged the trust he rarely extended. He'd lifted the phone, dialed her contact, steeling his voice to the edge that made developers fold and deals shatter. But now, moments after that decisive act, Rafael Moreno remained rooted in his office, the receiver clenched against his ear, veins standing out on his hand from the force of his grip. The young voice on the other end persisted, laced with sobs that pierced his composure. He drew a measured breath, compelling his tone to steady despite the fracture forming in his certainty. "Listen carefully, Sienna. What's your name doing on Lena's line?" Sienna: "I'm 9. I took her phone because I had to tell you something important, and I couldn't wait." A hesitation. Rafael didn't interrupt. He was reassessing, unaccustomed to variables in his meticulously controlled domain. Then Sienna delivered the words that upended it all. The skyline outside remained a glittering testament to his conquests. But in that instant, something in the office had irrevocably altered. Rafael Moreno, a titan unaccustomed to doubt, lowered himself into his chair, a motion he hadn't made without purpose in years. "Tell me everything you know," he said, his voice quieter, more intent than before. He surged from his desk, leaving the termination file abandoned, bypassing the scheduled acquisitions meeting on the 33rd floor, his tailored jacket forgotten over the armrest. Dara Cole, his household manager, paused in the corridor as he stormed toward the elevators, noting the shift in his stride. Something Ronan, his longtime security lead, I would later describe as the look of a man whose empire had just cracked from within. The elevator doors closed behind Rafael with a soft chime that felt louder than it should. He stepped into the underground garage, keys already in hand, and slid behind the wheel of the black Range Rover he kept for estate runs. The engine purred to life. He connected the call to the car's speakers without a word. Sienna's breathing filled the cabin, small, uneven, the sound of someone trying very hard not to cry anymore. He didn't tell her he was coming. He simply said, "Keep talking, Sienna. Start from the beginning." A pause. Then her voice, thinner now that the initial rush of courage had passed. "Okay. Last Tuesday I got sent home early because Mrs. Alvarez was sick and they canceled art. I was supposed to be in my room doing math packets. But..." She trailed off, the way children do when they realize they're confessing a minor crime. "I wasn't. I was reading under the stairs instead. That's where I heard them." "Them?" "Marcus and... I think Lena? But mostly Marcus. His shoes make that click-click on the marble. I know it's him before I even look." Raphael merged onto the freeway, eyes on the road, jaw tight. "Go on." I peeked through the banister. Lena's cart was already past the safe room door. She was down the hall, wiping the big mirror in the sitting room. Then Marcus came. He used his key card, same one he always uses, and went inside. He wasn't in there long. Maybe a minute? When he came out, he had something in his hand. Shiny, small. I couldn't see exactly. Then he walked over to Lena's cart real quick, looked around, and dropped it in, right on top of the rags. And then he left. Raphael's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "You didn't understand what you were seeing." "Not right then. I thought maybe he was helping her or something. But later that night I kept thinking about it. And then Carla got fired the next week, the one who used to bring me extra cookies. And I remembered Marcus was the one who said she took the silver candlesticks. Same kind of story. Camera stuff. Missing things. And she was gone so fast." The city blurred past. Raphael felt the first thin thread of unease coil behind his ribs. He didn't want it there. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" he asked, keeping his voice level, the way he spoke to contractors who were late on deadlines. Sienna was quiet so long he thought the call had dropped. Then she said, very softly, "Because Marcus is the one everyone tells things to. Like, if something's wrong, you tell Marcus and he fixes it. But I've seen what happens when people tell Marcus things about Marcus. They leave, fast, and nobody says why. I didn't want Lena to leave like Carla. She's nice. She always asks about school and she doesn't treat me like I'm invisible." Raphael swallowed once. The thread in his chest pulled tighter. "So, I started writing stuff down," she went on. "In my notebook. Dates when I heard his key card at weird times. Like 2 in the morning. And when the new security guy got let go last month because Marcus said he was in the wine cellar without permission. And how Lena started being extra careful. Like she was scared to touch anything. I figured if I had more than just one thing, maybe you'd believe me. Because grown-ups don't always believe kids the first time." He took the exit toward the estate. The gates rose ahead, iron and familiar. For the first time in years, he noticed how tall they were, how they kept the world out, but also kept everything inside sealed tight. Dara was waiting on the front steps when he pulled up, arms folded, expression carefully neutral. Raphael stepped out, phone still pressed to his ear. "Hold the termination," he said without preamble. "All of it. No paperwork moves until I say." Dara's eyes widened a fraction before she caught herself. Relief flickered across her face, quick, unguarded, then vanished behind professionalism. That single unguarded second told Raphael more than any audit ever could. He ended the call gently. "I'm here, Sienna." "I'm coming up." He found her in her room at the end of the East Hall. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed, the spiral notebook open on her lap like evidence in a very small trial. When he stepped inside, she didn't jump or hide it. She just looked up at him, direct, steady, the same way he looked at people across boardroom tables. They were alike in that, he realized. Neither of them liked unnecessary words. She held the notebook out without being asked. Raphael took it. The cover was plain blue, the kind they sell in every school supply aisle for $3. Inside, her handwriting was careful, but not perfect. Dates in neat columns, times underlined twice, little arrows connecting observations. Marcus in safe room 2:17 a.m. No reason. Carla fired after Marcus said silver missing. Lena stopped humming while she works. Page after page of a 9-year-old's quiet, methodical watchfulness. He read in silence. Sienna watched him from the bed, legs dangling now, toes brushing the floor. She didn't fidget. She waited. When he reached the last entry, yesterday's date, a single line underlined 3 times. Lena is scared. Don't let Daddy be wrong. Something in his throat closed. He closed the notebook slowly. Sienna's voice was small but certain. Do you believe me now? Raphael looked at his daughter, really looked, and saw the weight she had carried alone for 3 weeks. A weight no child should know how to carry. I believe you saw something, he said, and I'm going to look at everything, all of it. She nodded once, satisfied for the moment. And then she reached over and patted the edge of the bed beside her, the way she used to when she was smaller, and wanted him to read her one more chapter. He sat. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside these walls, something had already begun to shift. Raphael did not announce his presence. He simply moved through the service wing to the narrow alcove at the end of the main corridor, the one usually reserved for the vacuum and spare linens. He stood there, half in shadow, arms folded, watching. It felt foreign, hiding in his own house to observe someone who worked for him. He had never needed to hide before. People either came when summoned or disappeared when dismissed. There had been no middle ground. Lena Vasquez appeared at the far end, pushing her cart, wheels whispering against the marble. She was smaller than he remembered, or perhaps she had always made herself smaller. No humming, no idle chatter with the other staff. She moved with the deliberate economy of someone who had learned that every extra motion could be noticed, catalogued, judged. She paused at the doorway to the library, knocked once on the frame even though the room was empty, then stepped inside. Raphael watched her check corners, lift fragile objects with both hands as though they might shatter from disrespect alone. When she reached the mantel, she stopped. One of the framed photographs, Sienna at 7, gap-toothed and grinning beside a birthday pony, had tilted slightly. Lena set down her duster, reached up, and straightened it with careful thumbs, aligning the frame until it was perfect. Not because anyone had asked, not because it was on her checklist, not because the crookedness had bothered her. Raphael felt something shift behind his sternum, small and unwelcome. He stepped into the corridor. Lena turned at the sound of his shoes. The change was instantaneous, shoulders curling inward, chin dropping half an inch, spine straightening into the posture of practiced deference. Her hands found the edge of the cart and gripped it lightly, knuckles paling. She did not meet his eyes. Mr. Moreno, she said, voice soft. Correct. He stopped 3 paces away. I need to confirm your schedule for next week. Monday through Friday, 7 to 3. Same as always. 3 words after the first, then nothing. No elaboration, no question, no filler. The answer was complete and contained, the way a person speaks when they have learned that more words invite more scrutiny. He studied her. And the way she held herself was not the flinching of someone caught. It was deeper, quieter. The particular stillness of a person who has learned that guilt or innocence makes little difference when the verdict is already written. Proximity to power had taught her this shape. He had built the system that demanded it. Raphael nodded once. Thank you. She dipped her head and turned back to the cart, already reaching for the next cloth. He walked away without another word, the corridor suddenly too narrow. Less than 2 hours later, Dara appeared in his study doorway, a slim folder in her hand. IT pulled the internal comms audit. It took them 47 minutes once I told them what to look for. He took the folder without looking up. Opened it. 3 weeks ago. Time-stamped and logged. A message from Lena Vasquez to the household management inbox. Subject line, supply inventory discrepancies, second floor. The body was brief, professional, measured. Numbers that didn't match. Deliveries shorted by small, consistent amounts. A request for review. No accusations. Just facts, laid out in careful bullet points. The message had never reached Dara. The audit trail showed deletion 42 minutes after submission, deleted by an account with full administrative privileges. One name attached to that access level, Marcus Trell. Raphael read the report twice, the second time more slowly, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something less damning. The woman he had been ready to end, job, references, our future, was the same woman who had quietly tried to warn the household that something was wrong. Dara stood behind his chair now, reading over his shoulder. When she reached the deletion log, her breath caught, small but audible. Her face did what faces do when the mind catches up to the body's horror. Color drained, eyes widened fractionally, mouth parting as if to speak, and then deciding silence was safer. Raphael set the printed pages on the desk. He placed them face down, as though turning them away from the light might lessen their weight. Then he pressed both palms flat against the wood, fingers splayed, and stared at nothing. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air system. No outburst, no slammed fist, just the slow recognition that he had nearly destroyed someone who had tried, alone, without protection, to do the right thing. Dara shifted her weight once, then left without a word. Raphael remained seated. The photograph on the mantel in the library floated behind his eyes. Sienna's crooked smile, now perfectly aligned because Lena had paused to fix it. Something foundational had shifted, not with noise, not with drama, just the quiet, irreversible settling of truth into a place that had been built on certainty. The study lights burned low and steady. Raphael had cleared the desk of everything except the growing stack of termination files and the forensic accountant's preliminary report. Dara sat across from him, sleeves rolled to the elbows, coffee long gone cold. Neither had spoken much since he gave the order. Pull every security flag dismissal from the past 36 months. No summaries, full records. She raw data. They worked through the night in near silence. The only sounds, the rustle of paper, the soft click of keys, the occasional sharp intake of breath when another name landed on the pile. 7. 7 names before Lena Vasquez. Carla Reyes, 29. Let go 14 months ago after missing silverware turned up on a security still. 2 children under 10, no union, no savings buffer. Jerome Park, 41, dismissed 9 months prior for unauthorized access to the wine cellar, caught trying to pay down hospital bills from his wife's surgery. Maria Delgado, 34, gone 16 months back after a single irregularity in the linen inventory. Each file followed the same architecture. A security report authored or co-signed by Marcus Trell, missing items that appeared small enough to dismiss, and employees too vulnerable to fight back. The setups varied slightly, different angles, different planted evidence, but the outcome was identical. Quick exit, no questions, no follow-up. Raphael stared at the names until the letters blurred. He had signed every one of those terminations without a second glance. Marcus had brought the reports. Raphael had trusted the signature at the bottom. The forensic accountant's call came at 3:47 a.m. 4 hours of tracing, he said. Offshore adjacent accounts layered through a shell company whose name, MT Family Holdings, was barely 1 degree removed from Marcus Trell himself. Total diverted. $300,000 over 26 months. Not a fortune that could dent the empire, just enough to be comfortable, just enough to be deliberate. Dara read the summary aloud, voice flat. Or he knew you wouldn't check. He knew because you never check. Raphael did not answer. The words landed without resistance, the way truth sometimes does when it has waited long enough. Past midnight, the house was still except for the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the foyer. Raphael remained at the desk, files spread like evidence in a trial he had never intended to hold. He heard the soft creak of floorboards before he saw her. Sienna stood at the top of the staircase in her pajamas, hair mussed from sleep, one hand on the banister. She should have been in bed hours ago. "Did you find it?" she asked. Not tentative. Certain. He pushed back from the desk and climbed the stairs slowly. When he reached her, he sat on the step below so their eyes were level, a small adjustment that cost him nothing physically and more than he cared to measure in pride. "Yes," he said. "All of it." "Is Lena going to be okay?" "Yes." She nodded once, processing. Then, with the plain, unsentimental logic that belonged only to children who have carried something too large for too long. "You should probably also call the other people, the ones he did it to before Lena." Raphael felt the words settle somewhere deep. "I know." Sienna studied him a moment longer, then reached out and patted the back of his hand once. Firm, brief, as though that settled the matter. She turned and padded back to her room without another word. The hallway light clicked off behind her. Raphael stayed on the step. The city lights glowed through the tall windows below, distant and indifferent. He thought of the 7 files on his desk. Thought of Carla Reyes explaining to her children why they had to move again. Thought of Jerome Park staring at medical bills he could no longer pay. Thought of the culture he had built, absolute authority flowing downward, questions discouraged, trust placed in the man whose job it was to protect the house from threats both outside and in. Marcus had not exploited a flaw in the system. He had used the system exactly as it was designed. No one below him had ever felt safe enough to look up and ask why. Raphael pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes until spots danced behind the lids. When he lowered them again, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that follows the moment everything changes and nothing has yet been repaired. He stood eventually, walked back to the study, closed the door behind him. The files waited. Dara met him in the hallway outside the study, face pale, eyes fixed on the floor. "The formal notice went to her at 9 this morning. Standard procedure. I didn't know yet." Her voice was thin, the words carrying the weight of something already done that could not be undone. Raphael nodded once. He did not ask her to come with him. He did not call security. He simply turned and walked toward the staff wing alone. The corridor that connected the main house to the service quarters had always been there. Polished marble, soft lighting, doors evenly spaced. But he had never truly walked it. It was passage, not place. And a shortcut between his world and the people who kept it running. Tonight, the hallway felt longer, the air cooler, the distance between where he lived and where they lived suddenly measurable in steps he had never counted. Lena's door stood slightly ajar, light spilling into the corridor in a narrow gold stripe. Raphael stopped just outside, one hand resting on the frame. Through the gap, he saw her. She stood at the narrow bed, folding a small piece of paper with deliberate care. A child's drawing, crayon butterfly, wings bright purple and yellow, signed in wobbly letters, Sienna. Lena pressed the edges flat, creased them once, twice, then placed the folded square gently at the top of the open duffel bag on the mattress. She had been saving it. Raphael watched. 38 years of entering rooms, as though he owned the air inside them. And he did not know how to stand in a doorway and be the one who was wrong. She turned, saw him. The change was instant. Shoulders drawing in, chin lowering, hands finding the familiar posture of minimized presence, fear, not of guilt, but of what proximity to him had always meant. "Mr. Moreno." Her voice was quiet, correct. "I was just finishing. I'll be out within the hour." He stepped inside without invitation. The room was smaller than his private bathroom, a single window letting in the late afternoon slant of light, a narrow bed, a small desk holding 3 books, and 1 framed photograph. Lena and a teenage boy, both smiling against a background of palm trees. The space was clean, spare, lived in without excess. Nothing here belonged to the empire he had built. He stopped a respectful distance from her, and the words came out first in the wrong shape, clipped, formal, the way he addressed boardrooms. "I owe you an apology." He heard how they landed, too stiff, too distant. He tried again, slower. "I had a file on you that I accepted without question from a man who had been stealing from this house for over 2 years. I almost destroyed your career and your reputation because I never looked past the first page. I was wrong. I am sorry." Lena did not move. Her eyes stayed on the bag for a long moment before lifting to meet his. No immediate softening. No rush to absolve. "What happened to my report?" she asked. "The one I sent 3 weeks ago?" Raphael told her. The message logged, the deletion timestamp, the account that carried Marcus Trell's access privileges. But he watched her face as the pieces settled. The woman who had tried to warn the household had been silenced by the same man who framed her for the crime she had tried to expose. She exhaled once, a sound so quiet it barely carried. Not rage, not tears. Something quieter, deeper. The exhausted grief of someone who had almost stopped trusting her own judgment. She looked down at the folded butterfly on the duffel. Her fingers rested on it for a second, then lifted it carefully and set it back on the bed. Not inside the bag, but on the coverlet, in the small, clear space beside the pillow. She was not leaving yet. She had not forgiven. The two things were not the same, and neither of them pretended they were. Raphael stood in the doorway a moment longer. The room held silence the way a held breath holds everything unsaid. And then he turned and walked back down the corridor he had never really known, the weight of what he had almost done settling behind him like a door that would not quite close. Outside, the city continued its indifferent glow. Inside these walls, something had begun to mend, not quickly, not easily, but in the small, deliberate act of leaving a drawing on the bed instead of packing it away. Raphael made the call at 8:42 a.m. from the same desk where 48 hours earlier he had lifted the phone to end Lena Vasquez's future. The message was brief, professional, routine. "Marcus, one-on-one security review, my office, now." Marcus arrived at 9:03, moving with the easy stride of a man who had spent 2 years being the smartest person in every room. Dark suit, crisp shirt, leather portfolio tucked under one arm. And he even carried a small suggestion, typed notes on upgrading the safe room camera angles. The irony hung in the air like smoke. Neither man named it. The 34th floor office was unchanged. Floor-to-ceiling glass, Houston sprawling gold and glass below, the same walnut desk, the same chair Raphael had sat in when Sienna's voice cracked everything open. The geometry was identical. The power had completely redistributed. Marcus settled into the guest chair without waiting for an invitation. He opened the portfolio, cleared his throat, and began the prepared remarks he had rehearsed on the elevator ride up. "Sir, I've been reviewing the second-floor feed coverage. There are blind spots near the east corridor access. If we reposition 2 of the—" Raphael did not interrupt with words. He simply reached forward and placed 3 items on the desk between them. First, a tablet, screen already lit, paused on a single frame from the unedited security footage. Marcus's hand, unmistakable, dropping something small and shiny into Lena's cleaning cart 6 minutes after she had passed the safe room door. Second, the audit summary, single page, bullet point stark, 26 months. 7 names before Lena's, $300,000. Third, Lena's report, printed and time-stamped, the deletion log clipped beneath it like an autopsy report. The careful language of a woman who had tried to do the right thing. The administrative account that erased it. Marcus Trell's name attached. Raphael said nothing. He leaned back and waited. Marcus stared at the items. His prepared sentence died halfway. Then the portfolio remained open on his lap, notes forgotten. He tried deflection first. Timestamps can be questioned. Audits get misread all the time. You know how these systems... Raphael did not argue. He reached into the drawer and placed a fourth document on top of the stack. The account transfer records. Dates, amounts, routing numbers. MT Family Holdings staring back in plain black ink. Marcus swallowed once. Then the rationalization came, quieter now, the voice of a man testing exits. Compensation inequity, years of loyalty unrewarded. I've been here longer than most of the senior staff. I thought... Raphael did not speak. He simply looked at Marcus with the calm, unblinking expression of a man who had heard every version of justification the world could offer and found none of them interesting. The room went still. And the only sound was the faint hum of the city 34 floors below. Marcus's shoulders settled. Not in defeat, exactly, in recognition. There were no more exits. "What are you going to do?" he asked, voice flat. "Every employee you destroyed will be found. Compensated, offered restitution. The financial records go to my attorneys. What happens next is their domain, not mine. And publicly? That depends on what you decide to do in the next 60 seconds. Marcus studied the desk for a long moment. Then he closed the portfolio with deliberate care. He stood, straightened his jacket, picked up the leather case, walked to the door without looking back. The door clicked shut behind him. Raphael remained seated. He did not feel satisfaction. He felt the particular exhaustion of a man who had won something that should never have needed winning. The evidence still lay on the desk like spent ammunition. He made no move to gather it. Outside, the city kept its indifferent rhythm. Inside the office, where he had once been certain of everything, certainty had been replaced by something quieter, heavier, and far more expensive. He exhaled once, slowly. Then he reached for the phone. There were 7 calls to make. Raphael sat alone in the study after Marcus left. The evidence still lay on the desk, but he did not look at it again. Instead, he opened the termination file to the first name. Carla Reyes. He dialed the number himself. No assistant, no attorney, no buffer. The line rang 4 times. A woman's voice answered, cautious, tired. "Hello? Carla Reyes?" A pause. "Who's calling?" "Rafael Moreno." Silence stretched long enough that he thought she might hang up. When she spoke again, her voice was flat, guarded. "What do you want?" He told her everything. The setup, the manipulated footage, Marcus Trell's pattern, that she had been the first of 8. That restitution was already being arranged. Full back pay, legal fees covered, references rewritten, clean. She listened without interruption. When he finished, there was another long quiet. "It's been 14 months, she said at last. "I lost my apartment. My kids had to change schools, twice." "I know," he said. "I am sorry. It was my system and I didn't look at it closely enough." She did not forgive him. She did not refuse the restitution either. She simply said, "Send the paperwork," and ended the call. Raphael set the phone down. But he made the next call. And the next. 7 names. 7 conversations that varied only in small details. The same stunned silence, the same measured recounting of damage done, the same careful acceptance of what was offered. No one shouted. No one cried on the line. The hurt had settled too deep for that. That evening at dinner, Sienna sat across from him, fork moving through pasta she wasn't really eating. Dara had been in earlier, mentioning the compensation list in passing while dropping off files. Sienna's head had lifted at the phrase. She waited until Dara left the room. "What's the compensation list?" Raphael set his fork down. He told her the truth, scaled to 9 years old but not condescending. Marcus did this to other people before Lena. He made it look like they did things they didn't. But they lost their jobs. Sienna was quiet, chewing the inside of her cheek the way she did when she was thinking hard. "How many?" "7. Before Lena." Another pause. She looked at her plate, then back at him. Were they all like Lena? People who didn't have anyone to call? Raphael felt the question land square in his chest. "Yes," he said. "I think that's exactly right." Sienna nodded once, as though filing the information away. Then she said, matter of fact, the way she might point out that the sky was blue. "Then you need to be the person they could have called." The sentence hung between them. Simple. Unadorned. A child applying elementary logic to a problem adults had spent years overcomplicating. Raphael did not answer right away. He let it sit, let it settle. Sienna picked up her fork again and took another bite. Later, and after she had gone upstairs to read, Raphael sat in the quiet kitchen with his phone in his hand. He scrolled to a number he had not dialed in 4 years. Nate Moreno, his brother. He pressed call before he could reconsider. It rang twice. "Hello?" Nate's voice was wary, deeper than Raphael remembered. "Nate." A beat. "Raphael." Neither spoke for a moment. The silence was awkward but not hostile. "Is everything okay?" Nate asked finally. Raphael exhaled. "Not yet, but I'm working on it." Another pause. Not long. Not uncomfortable. "Okay," Nate said. "Let me know when you're ready to talk." "I will." The call ended. Raphael set the phone face down on the counter and stared at it for a long moment. Sienna appeared in the doorway, barefoot, holding a glass of water she had gotten for herself. While she did not ask what he was doing or why he looked the way he did, she simply watched him with the quiet, noticing expression of a child who has seen something shift and is choosing, for now, not to comment. She took a sip of water, then turned and padded back upstairs without a word. Raphael remained at the counter. The house was still. No dramatic music, no swelling resolution, just the small, unglamorous work of trying to undo what had been done. One call, one conversation, one careful step at a time. Outside, Houston glittered on, indifferent. Inside, something was beginning to mend. 1 week after Marcus walked out of the 34th floor office, Lena had not left the estate. She moved through the same corridors, cleaned the same rooms, kept the same hours. But the quiet deference that had once defined her was gone. But in its place was something firmer, present, professional, entirely closed. She met eyes when spoken to, answered fully, then withdrew. No extra words, no lingering smiles. The space she occupied felt deliberate, guarded. Dara found Raphael in the study late that afternoon, files under one arm. "She's waiting," Dara said without preamble, "to see if the apology was real or if it was crisis management." Raphael looked up from the compensation agreements he had been reviewing. The words landed without heat, but they stung in a way few accusations ever had. He had never been accused of false contrition. He had never needed to be. Yet the possibility that Dara might be right sat between them, unanswerable for now. He nodded once. Dara left without pressing. Later, they needing air and a route that avoided the main rooms now crowded with attorneys, Raphael took the back door through the service passage. It opened onto the estate garden, a quiet rectangle of clipped hedges, stone paths, and a single iron bench beneath an old live oak. Lena sat there on her break, back straight, hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing in particular. He hesitated at the threshold of grass and stone, then walked over and sat at the far end of the bench. She did not stand. She did not leave. She simply shifted her gaze to include him. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to answer honestly, not carefully." She turned her head slightly. "That's new." He felt the corner of his mouth lift, almost a smile, then let it fade. "Why didn't you dispute the dismissal? You had filed the report. You had grounds." Lena looked out at the garden again, at the late afternoon light filtering through the oak leaves. When she spoke, her voice was even, unhurried. "Because disputing it would have meant fighting you. And when your employer can affect your references, your next job, your entire professional reputation, you don't fight. You calculate whether fighting is something you can afford." She turned to face him directly for the first time. "I couldn't afford it." Raphael held her gaze. The statement carried no accusation, only fact. It was not comfortable to hold. Neither spoke for several minutes. The garden held its breath around them. Then Lena said, "I don't need grand gestures. I don't need a raise or a title. What I need is for you to build a system where a person who sees something wrong has somewhere safe to report it. Not to someone who can be bought, somewhere real." Raphael exhaled slowly. "I'm already doing that." "I know. Dara told me." She paused. "I just wanted you to hear me say it." He nodded once. She nodded in return. His eyes drifted past her shoulder to the staff quarters visible through the garden archway. In one window, on the wall facing the path, he caught a flash of color. Sienna's crayon butterfly, the same one Lena had been folding so carefully the day he stood in her doorway. It was back on the wall now, taped in place, vivid against the plain paint. He did not mention it. He did not need to. The small, stubborn act of keeping it meant something to him all the same. They sat in silence a while longer. The distance between them on the bench remained, but it felt slightly narrower than when he had first sat down, not because anything had been resolved, but because both of them had chosen to stay. Lena rose first. She brushed invisible lint from her sleeve, a small, habitual motion. "I should get back," she said. He stood as well. "Thank you for answering." She gave a single nod, small, sufficient, then walked back toward the house. Raphael remained by the bench, watching her go until she disappeared through the service door. The garden returned to its quiet. No dramatic music, no sweeping resolution, just two people who had carried something heavy for too long, and who had, for the first time, set it down in the same place. It was not forgiveness. It was not finished. It was a beginning. Raphael found out at breakfast. Sienna sat across from him, and spooning cereal with careful precision, and said without preamble or guilt, "I called Uncle Nate yesterday. I invited him to lunch." Raphael's coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. "You called him?" She nodded once, as though the logistics were obvious. "You called the 7 people. I called the 1 person. We both had homework." He set the cup down slowly. No anger, just the quiet surprise of realizing his daughter had been paying closer attention than he had ever assumed. Nate arrived at 11. He stood at the front gate on the security screen, taller than Raphael remembered, or perhaps standing differently, shoulders relaxed in a way that suggested he had finally stopped bracing for conflict. When Raphael opened the door, they shook hands, stiff at first, then warmer, the grip lingering a second longer than either expected. And before either man could speak, Sienna shot past Raphael like a small comet. She threw her arms around Nate's waist without hesitation, hugging a man she had never met because, to her, family was family and introductions were unnecessary. Nate froze for half a heartbeat. Then he bent and returned the hug, awkward, careful, but real. While Sienna led Nate through the garden to show him the live oak and the stone paths, Raphael and his brother found themselves alone in the kitchen waiting for coffee to finish brewing. The machine gurgled softly between them. "She told me what happened," Nate said. "All of it." Raphael leaned against the counter. "She talks a lot. She's incredible." No qualifier, just fact. Nate looked out the window where Sienna was pointing at something in the flower bed. "I want to help with the restitution. But I know employment law. I can reach the 7 in a way that's better than an attorney call." 4 years of estrangement stretched across the granite countertop. Raphael felt the distance, measured it, then chose not to cross it in one step. "I should have listened to you," he said, 4 years ago, about the building acquisition. You were right about the tenants." Nate met his eyes. "I know I was right. I wanted you to know it too." A beat. Better late. The coffee maker beeped. Neither moved to pour. That night, the house settled into quiet. Nate had left after lunch, promising to return the following week with paperwork. And Lena had finished her shift, the butterfly drawing still taped to her wall. Raphael walked the halls, checking locks out of habit, then found Sienna sitting on the top step of the staircase in her pajamas. Her legs dangling. She should have been asleep. She always should have been asleep. He sat on the step below her, the same position they had occupied weeks earlier when everything was still unraveling. Their faces were level. The silence between them carried accumulated meaning now. "You're not asleep," he said. "Neither are you." Another long quiet. The city lights glowed gold through the tall windows below. "Sienna," he began, "what you did, calling me, the notebook, all of it, was one of the bravest things I've ever seen." She considered this seriously, head tilted. "I was scared." "I know." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Were you scared? When you went to talk to Marcus?" He gave her the honest answer. "Not of Marcus. I was scared of being the kind of man who had let it happen for 2 years and never noticed." Sienna nodded once, accepting the truth without judgment. "You almost didn't listen to me," she said, "when I called." It was not a question. Raphael felt the precision of it settle in his chest. "I almost didn't," he said. "And I need you to know I'm going to spend a long time thinking about that." She reached over and took his hand, small fingers against his large ones. No ceremony, just connection. He held his daughter's hand. The city outside was gold and glass as it always was. But the man inside the house was different from the one who had stood at that 34th floor window 3 weeks ago, certain of everything and blind to what mattered. He was not certain of everything anymore. He was, for the first time, certain of the right things. The butterfly drawing remained on Lena's wall. Nate was coming back. The 7 people were being found. And none of it was finished. All of it was begun. Transformation is not a moment. It is a direction. Sienna had pointed her father in the right one.